The crystalline spires of Nova Terra rose like frozen flames against the purple sky of Oros, their surfaces refracting the light of the binary stars into countless rainbow patterns. Commander Olivia Reed stood at the observation deck of the Colonial Administration Building, her weathered hands pressed against the transparent aluminum as she watched the latest supply shuttle make its descent through the swirling auroras. 10 years of successful colonization had transformed the valley below from barren rock into a thriving metropolis. Human ingenuity combined with Orosian crystal technology had created something unprecedented in the history of either species. Yet beneath the gleaming surface, Olivia could feel the foundation of everything they'd built beginning to crack. "Commander Reed," a voice called from behind her. "The council is waiting." Olivia turned to face her aide, Marcus Wong, noting the tension in his usually composed features. "How many showed up this time?" "3 of the 5 human representatives," Marcus replied, his dark eyes troubled. "Only 2 Orosians." She nodded, unsurprised but disappointed. The growing divide between humans and their Orosian hosts had become impossible to ignore. What had started as simple cultural misunderstandings had evolved into something far more dangerous. The council chamber was eerily quiet when Olivia entered, the usual soft chiming of Orosian greeting crystals conspicuously absent. The human representatives sat on one side of the curved table, the Orosians on the other, with an empty space between them that seemed to grow wider with each passing day. Caius, the Orosian elder, rose as she entered. His crystalline form caught the light, sending patterns dancing across the walls. "Commander Reed," he said, his translated voice carrying notes of both respect and wariness. "We must discuss the incident at the Eastern Mining Complex." Olivia took her place at the head of the table, feeling the weight of leadership settle heavily on her shoulders. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports. It appears there was a misunderstanding about resource allocation." "A misunderstanding?" Counselor Richardson scoffed from the human side. "They deliberately sabotaged our equipment." "We did no such thing," Caius's daughter, Venna, countered. Her usually melodic voice had taken on a sharp edge. The crystal matrices were becoming unstable. "We attempted to warn your miners, but they refused to listen. Because your warning came in the form of cryptic symbols that nobody could interpret." Richardson shot back. "If you just agree to share your complete language database." "Our language is sacred," Caius interrupted, his crystalline form vibrating with barely contained emotion. "It is not merely a tool for communication, but a key to understanding the very essence of our being. We have shared what we believe you are ready to comprehend." Olivia raised her hand, silencing the brewing argument. "This is exactly the kind of breakdown in communication we need to address. Both sides have valid concerns, but we're letting our differences blind us to our commonalities." She activated the holographic display in the center of the table, showing the mining complex in question. "The Eastern Complex sits on one of the richest veins of crystals we've discovered. Crystals that both our peoples need. The humans need them for power generation and construction. The Orosians need them for their cultural and biological processes. There must be a way to share this resource that benefits everyone. The humans take too much, too quickly," Venna said, her form shifting through shades of blue that Olivia had learned to associate with distress. "They do not understand the delicate balance that must be maintained. Each crystal matrix is connected to others throughout our world. Disrupting one affects all." "We've followed every safety protocol you've given us," Marcus interjected. "But your protocols keep changing, and you won't explain why. How are we supposed to adapt if you won't trust us with the full picture?" Olivia watched the familiar dance of accusation and defense, seeing the deeper currents beneath the surface. The Orosians' reluctance to share certain aspects of their culture stemmed from centuries of isolation and a genuine belief that some knowledge could be dangerous if misunderstood. The humans' frustration came from their drive to understand, to innovate, to push boundaries. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "we need to approach this from a different angle. Instead of focusing on what divides us, let's look at what we've accomplished together. She adjusted the hologram, showing the evolution of Nova Terra over the past decade. When we first arrived, we couldn't even survive on the surface without erosion crystal technology. You shared that knowledge with us, taught us how to adapt. In return, we've helped develop new applications for crystal technology that benefit both our peoples. That was before, Caius said softly. Before your people began to see our gifts as rights, our guidance as restrictions. And before your people began treating us like children who couldn't be trusted with the truth, Richardson countered. The meeting continued for hours, but with each passing moment, Olivia could feel the gulf between the two species widening. When they finally adjourned, she remained in the chamber alone, studying the holographic display of their colony. Everything they'd built together stood as a testament to what cooperation between species could achieve. Yet now it all balanced on a knife's edge. A soft chiming announced Caius's return. The Erosion Elder moved to stand beside her, his crystalline form reflecting her troubled expression in countless facets. "You fear for the future," he said. It wasn't a question. "I fear what happens when fear and mistrust overcome reason and cooperation," Olivia replied. "We've come too far together to let it end in conflict." "Perhaps," Caius said, his form shifting through complex patterns of light, "it is not about ending, but transforming. Sometimes growth requires pain." As Olivia left the council chamber that evening, the binary suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of deep purple and crimson. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were approaching a point of no return. The question was, would they find a way to bridge the growing divide, or would the dream of peaceful coexistence shatter like a dropped crystal? In her quarters that night, Olivia reviewed the day's reports on her tablet. Resource disputes, cultural misunderstandings, minor confrontations that could easily escalate, the signs of growing tension were everywhere. Yet she refused to believe it was too late to change course. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to find common ground. As she drifted off to sleep, the soft hum of the crystal-powered environmental systems surrounded her like a lullaby, a reminder of what humans and Erosians could achieve together, if only they could remember how to trust each other again. The warning signs had been there for weeks, but no one wanted to believe it could happen. The crystal matrices that powered Nova Terra's infrastructure were showing increasingly erratic energy patterns, but both humans and Erosians were too caught up in their disputes to see the looming catastrophe. Theron, the leading Erosian crystallographer, tried to sound the alarm. His research facility, located deep within the crystal forests outside the colony, had detected disturbing resonance patterns spreading through the natural crystal formations. He rushed to Nova Terra, his crystalline form pulsing with urgent colors as he made his way to the Colonial Administration building. "Commander Reed," he called out, finding Olivia in her office. "We need to evacuate the Eastern Mining Complex immediately." Olivia looked up from her work, noting the unusual patterns rippling across Theron's surface. In their years of working together, she'd never seen him so agitated. "What's wrong?" "The crystal matrices are destabilizing," he explained, projecting a holographic display from his core. "The mining operations have disrupted a critical node in the planetary network. If we don't stop immediately, the resonance cascade could." An alarm blared through the building, cutting him off. The floor trembled beneath their feet. "It's starting," Theron whispered, his voice filled with horror. Olivia was already moving, activating the colony-wide emergency broadcast system. "This is Commander Reed. All personnel in and around the Eastern Mining Complex, evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, evacuate immediately." But it was too late. The first explosion rocked the entire valley, a blinding flash of crystalline energy that sent shockwaves through the colony's shield barriers. From her office window, Olivia watched in horror as the crystal forests began to shatter, each breaking crystal triggering a chain reaction in its neighbors. "Theron, what's happening?" she demanded, even as she coordinated evacuation efforts through her comm system. The Orosian scientist's form had gone almost transparent with distress. The resonance cascade, it's spreading faster than I calculated. The crystal matrices are collapsing, releasing all their stored energy at once. Marcus, Olivia called into her comm, get me Caius and the council. We need to. Another explosion drowned out her words. The crystal spires of Nova Terra, once so beautiful, were now becoming deadly as they absorbed and amplified the cascading energy release. We can't stop it, Theron said, his translated voice breaking with emotion. But we might be able to contain it. Commander. Olivia. I need your help. She met his gaze, seeing in his crystalline facets the same determination she felt. Whatever you need. The human's shield technology, he said quickly. If we can modify it to create a resonance barrier around the affected areas. They worked frantically, human and Orosian technology combining in ways neither species had attempted before. Olivia coordinated with her engineering teams while Theron communicated with his fellow Orosians, their combined knowledge their only hope of preventing total catastrophe. Hours passed in a blur of emergency responses, evacuations, and desperate attempts to contain the spreading destruction. When it was finally over, nearly a third of Nova Terra lay in ruins. The crystal forests to the east were gone, reduced to fields of inert shards that would never sing again. The emergency council meeting that followed was unlike any before. Gone was the physical division between species, the destruction had forced them to abandon the formal council chamber for a makeshift command center where humans and Orosians worked side by side. The damage is extensive, Caius reported, his usual luminescence dimmed by exhaustion. Many of the sacred crystal matrices are beyond recovery. Without them, the balance of our world is severely compromised. Our people can't survive here without the crystal technology, Richardson added, his earlier antagonism replaced by grim reality. The environmental systems, power generation, everything depends on it. Olivia stood before them, the weight of command feeling heavier than ever. Then we all know what has to happen. The human colony must be evacuated. The announcement sent shockwaves through both communities. Despite their differences, despite the growing tensions, no one had truly believed it would come to this. 10 years of cooperation and achievement, ending in exodus. It's the only way, Theron confirmed, moving to stand beside Olivia. The remaining crystal matrices must be allowed to heal, to restore the natural balance. That cannot happen with the continued demands of the colony. The evacuation plans were drawn up quickly, necessity overriding bureaucracy. The humans would take only what they could carry on the emergency fleet. Everything else, the buildings, the infrastructure, the dreams of a shared future, would be left behind. On the day of departure, Olivia stood once more at the observation deck where this chapter of her life had begun. Theron joined her, their reflections merging in the transparent aluminum. This isn't the end, she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. We've learned too much from each other to let it end like this. The crystals will heal, Theron replied. And perhaps, in time, so will the wounds between our peoples. When that day comes, Olivia promised, we'll be ready to try again. Wiser for our mistakes, stronger for our shared pain. As the evacuation ships rose through Oros's atmosphere, carrying the hopes and regrets of two species, Olivia couldn't help but wonder if they would ever return. The purple sky, the crystal forests, the dream of what might have been, it all grew smaller in the viewport until it was just another point of light in the vast darkness of space. But even as they left their shared home behind, something new had been born in the crucible of crisis. Humans and Orosians had worked together to prevent total disaster, proving that cooperation was possible even in the darkest moments. The price of pride had been high, but the lesson it taught might prove invaluable in the years to come. 10 years could change everything and nothing at all. Olivia Reed stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching the rust-colored storm sweep across the planet's surface below. The colony they'd built here was nothing like Nova Terra, all utilitarian metal and plastic, designed to withstand the harsh environment rather than work in harmony with it. She touched the small crystal pendant at her throat, its faint warmth a reminder of everything they'd left behind. It was one of the few pieces of Orosian technology they'd brought with them, a gift from Theron before their departure. In the decade since, it had become both a comfort and a burden, like the memories it represented. "Commander?" Marcus Wong's voice interrupted her thoughts. Her once young aide had grown into a capable administrator, though the years on Haven had left their mark on him too. "We're receiving a transmission. Well, you need to see this." In the communications center, a small crowd had gathered around the main display. The message was garbled by interference from Haven's constant storms, but its origin was clear: Oros. "How long ago did this come in?" Olivia asked, her heart racing despite her outward calm. 20 minutes, Marcus replied. "We've been trying to clean up the signal." The screen flickered, and suddenly Theron's familiar crystalline form appeared. Though the quality was poor, Olivia could see that his usual brilliant colors had dimmed significantly. "Commander Reed," his translated voice crackled through the speakers. "I hope this message reaches you. We need your help. Oros is dying." The recording continued, describing a cascade of environmental failures that had begun in the years after the human evacuation. The crystal matrices, rather than healing as expected, had begun to deteriorate at an accelerating rate. The Orosians' attempts to stabilize their world had only made things worse. "We were wrong," Theron admitted, his form pulsing with what Olivia recognized as deep distress. "Our pride, our insistence on maintaining separation between our peoples, it blinded us to a crucial truth. The presence of human technology, properly integrated with our crystal networks, wasn't destroying our world. It was helping to stabilize it." The revelation hit Olivia like a physical blow. All those years ago, they'd believed they were saving Oros by leaving. Instead, they might have inadvertently condemned it. "We understand if you refuse," Theron continued. "We have no right to ask for your help after what happened. But if there's any chance, any hope of saving our world, we need the knowledge and perspective that only humans can provide." The message ended, leaving the communication center in stunned silence. Olivia looked around at the faces of her people, some angry, some thoughtful, all marked by the hardships of their life on Haven. "It could be a trap," Richardson said from his position near the back of the room. He'd survived the evacuation too, though the years had turned his hair white. "Or a trick of some kind." "The Orosians don't lie," Olivia replied automatically, then caught herself. 10 years of separation, and still some instincts remained unchanged. "But we need to discuss this carefully. Call the council." Hours later, in Haven's stark council chamber, the debate raged on. The human colony had built something here, carved a life out of Haven's hostile environment. Was it worth risking everything they'd achieved for the sake of the people who had once forced them to leave their homes? "We're barely surviving here," Marcus pointed out during a lull in the arguments. "Haven's storms are getting worse every year. Our shielding technology can only do so much without the crystal matrices to reinforce it." "And what about our children?" Dr. Patel, the colony's chief medical officer, added. "They're showing signs of adaptation to Haven's environment, but the long-term effects of the high radiation levels concern me." Olivia listened to all sides, weighing each argument carefully. Finally, she stood, and the room fell silent. 10 years ago, we left Oros because we believed it was the only way to save both our peoples. We've survived here on Haven, yes, but survival isn't enough. Not when we have the chance to do more, to be more." She activated the holographic display, showing Theron's message again. "The Orosians are asking for our help. Not demanding, not commanding, asking. They've acknowledged their mistakes, their pride. Perhaps it's time we acknowledge ours as well. What are you suggesting? Richardson asked, his voice careful. I'm suggesting we go back. Not all of us, we can't risk everything on one venture. But a team of specialists, experts in the fields the Orosians need most. We've learned a lot in the past 10 years about surviving in hostile environments. Maybe those lessons, combined with Orosian crystal technology, could save both our peoples. The debate continued late into the night, but in the end, the decision was made. They would send a mission back to Oros. The team would include engineers, environmental specialists, and medical personnel, along with Olivia herself. As she packed her few personal belongings, Olivia found herself drawn back to the observation deck. Haven's storms painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, so different from the purple twilights of Oros. The crystal pendant at her throat seemed warmer than usual, as if responding to the prospect of returning home. Are we doing the right thing? Marcus asked, joining her at the window. He would be staying behind to manage the colony, though she could see the conflict in his eyes. I don't know, Olivia admitted. But I know we have to try. Sometimes the greatest risk is in refusing to take any risk at all. As she watched the preparations for their departure, Olivia couldn't help but wonder what they would find when they returned to Oros. Had 10 years changed the Orosians as much as it had changed the humans? And more importantly, could two proud species learn from their past mistakes to forge a better future together? The crystal pendant pulsed gently against her skin, its rhythm matching her heartbeat. Whatever awaited them on Oros, one thing was certain: this time, things would have to be different. The survival of both species might depend on it. The ship they chose for the return journey to Oros was called the Phoenix, a name that carried both hope and irony. A fraction of the size of the evacuation fleet that had brought them to Haven, it housed only 50 specialists chosen for their expertise, and their willingness to risk everything on this mission. Olivia spent most of her time in the ship's observation room, watching the stars streak by. They'd modified the Phoenix's engines with crystal technology salvaged from their evacuation, giving them better speed than any pure human ship could achieve. Still, the journey would take months. The latest simulations are ready, announced Dr. Nina Roscoff, their lead physicist, entering the observation room with a tablet. Her dark eyes were bright with excitement. We've been studying the crystal fragments we brought from Haven, comparing them to our old data from Oros. I think we've found something interesting. Olivia gestured for her to continue, and Nina projected a holographic model into the air between them. Look at these resonance patterns. We always assumed the crystals were just highly efficient energy conductors, but they're more than that. They're alive, or at least, they exist in a state between what we consider living and non-living. The Orosians tried to tell us that, Olivia said softly, remembering conversations with Theron from years ago. We just didn't understand what they meant. Exactly. Nina's hands moved through the hologram, highlighting different patterns. And here's the really fascinating part. The crystal matrices don't just store and transmit energy, they adapt to it. Our human technology, when properly integrated, wasn't harming them. They were evolving to work with it. Before Olivia could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. Red emergency lights began flashing, and the deck lurched beneath their feet. Bridge, report. Olivia commanded, already moving toward the door. Unknown energy signature dead ahead, came the response. It's massive, Commander. Like nothing we've ever seen. In the bridge, the main viewport showed what looked like a tear in space itself, ribbons of crystalline energy writhing in patterns that hurt the eyes to look at. Analysis? Olivia demanded. It's similar to the energy signatures we saw during the crystal matrix collapse on Oros, Nina replied, her fingers flying over the sensor controls. But the scale is impossible. It's as if the deterioration has spread beyond the planet, Olivia finished. How long until we reach Oros? 3 weeks at current speed, the navigation officer reported. That might be too late, Nina said quietly. These readings, whatever's happening on Oros is accelerating. Olivia touched the crystal pendant at her throat, feeling its warmth pulse with an unfamiliar rhythm. Can we go faster? Not safely, the engineering chief replied. The crystal hybrid engines are already running at maximum capacity. But Olivia's attention was on her pendant, which had begun to glow with an inner light she'd never seen before. Nina, scan this crystal. Something's happening. The physicist turned her instruments toward the pendant, and her eyes widened. It's resonating with the anomaly ahead. The energy patterns are synchronized, but stable. Commander, I think it's trying to show us something. Olivia unclasped the pendant, holding it up to the viewport. The crystal's glow intensified, and suddenly the ship screens filled with cascading data, information encoded in the crystal structure that they'd never known was there. It's a message, Nina breathed, reading the translations as they appeared. From Theron. He knew something like this might happen. The crystal matrices aren't just Oros's power source, they're part of a planetary defense system, designed to protect against cosmic threats. When we left, we took with us a key part of that system, Olivia finished, understanding dawning. Our technology, working in harmony with theirs, wasn't just about power generation. It was about balance. The ship shuddered again as another wave of energy washed over them from the spatial anomaly. But now they had new options, new understanding. Engineering, Olivia commanded, I need you to reconfigure the crystal hybrid engines according to this data. Nina, work with them. We're not just going to rush past this anomaly, we're going to help close it. The next hours were a blur of activity as the crew raced to modify their systems. The Phoenix's engines were stripped down and rebuilt, incorporating the new knowledge hidden in Theron's crystal. As they worked, Olivia couldn't help but marvel at the foresight of her old friend. Even in the midst of their forced separation, he had found a way to give them the tools they might need. When everything was ready, the Phoenix faced the spatial tear with its modified engines humming at full power. The crystal technologies, fully integrated with human engineering in a way they'd never achieved before, sang with harmonious energy. All hands, brace for maneuver, Olivia ordered. Engineering, channel all power through the crystal matrices on my mark. Nina, monitor the resonance patterns. If we do this right, we're not just saving ourselves, we're practicing for what we'll need to do on Oros. The ship moved forward, its hybrid systems reaching out to interact with the chaotic energies of the anomaly. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the wild patterns began to stabilize, the tear in space starting to seal itself as the Phoenix's carefully tuned energies helped restore balance to the region. As they passed through the stabilized zone, Olivia felt her crystal pendant pulse once more, its rhythm now perfectly synchronized with the ship's systems. They had succeeded in this first test, but she knew it was only the beginning. Somewhere ahead, Oros waited for them, its crystal heart crying out for the harmony that only human and Orosian cooperation could achieve. Plot our course to Oros, she ordered, her voice firm with renewed purpose. Maximum safe speed. We have a world to save. The Phoenix surged forward through the stars, carrying with it humanity's second chance at a dream they'd once thought lost forever. But this time, they were armed with new understanding, hard-won wisdom, and the knowledge that true progress could only come through genuine cooperation between species. That was Olivia's first thought as the Phoenix entered orbit around her former home. The once vibrant purple atmosphere had turned a sickly gray, and the crystal forests that had once sparkled with rainbow light were visibly dimmed even from space. Massive energy distortions, similar to the anomaly they'd encountered en route but smaller, peppered the planet's surface. Life signs? She asked, her voice tight. Concentrated in the underground caverns, the sensor officer reported. The Orosians appear to have retreated beneath the surface. Environmental conditions up here are extremely unstable. Commander, Nina called from her station, the crystal matrices are approaching critical resonance. If we don't act soon. Take us down, Olivia ordered. Landing site Delta 3. It was where they'd first established Nova Terra, all those years ago. If anywhere on the planet still had the infrastructure they needed, it would be there. The Phoenix's descent through the turbulent atmosphere was rough, crystal hybrid engines straining to maintain stability as energy storms buffeted the ship from all sides. When they finally broke through the cloud layer, the sight below stole Olivia's breath. Nova Terra, their once proud colony, was barely recognizable. The crystal spires had grown wild and chaotic, their surfaces cracked and pulsing with unstable energy. The ground itself seemed to shimmer with dangerous resonance patterns. They landed on what had once been the main plaza, now a fractured expanse of crystal shards and metallic debris. As the landing ramp lowered, Olivia's crystal pendant burned hot against her skin, responding to the chaotic energies around them. Environmental suits sealed and checked, she commanded. No one steps outside without. She was interrupted by movement in the ruins. From beneath the shattered crystal structures, figures emerged, Orosians, their crystalline forms dimmed and fragmented, but still alive. At their head was a familiar shape. Theron, Olivia breathed. The Orosian scientist approached the ship, his once brilliant form now barely brighter than the gray sky above. Behind him, Olivia recognized Caius and others from the old council, all of them changed by the decade of crisis. Commander Reed, Theron's translated voice carried clearly across the plaza. You came. Olivia descended the ramp, her environmental suit sensors screaming warnings about the unstable energy fields around them. We came, she confirmed. And I think we've finally understood what you were trying to tell us all those years ago. Nina emerged from the ship, carrying their latest sensor readings. The crystal matrices, she announced without preamble, they're not just a power source or a defense system. They're the planet's nervous system, aren't they? And when we left, we removed a vital part of that system, Theron finished. Yes. Our pride prevented us from explaining fully, and your pride prevented you from seeing what was right in front of you. The harmony between our technologies wasn't an accident, it was essential. A violent tremor shook the ground, and new cracks appeared in the nearby crystal structures. Warning alarms blared from the Phoenix. Commander, Nina called urgently, we're running out of time. The resonance cascade is approaching critical levels. If we're going to attempt stabilization, show them what we learned, Olivia ordered. As Nina began sharing their data with the Orosians, Olivia turned to Theron. The crystal you gave me before we left, you encoded it with information we'd need. A safeguard, he admitted. I hoped we would never need it, that we would find another way. But as the years passed and our world began to die, another tremor, stronger this time, interrupted him. Crystal shards rained down from the ruined buildings around them. We don't have time for regrets, Olivia said firmly. Nina, are the modifications ready? Yes, but Commander. The physicist hesitated. To generate a stabilizing field strong enough to affect the entire planet, we'll need to channel enormous amounts of energy through the crystal matrices. The Phoenix's engines weren't designed for this kind of strain. What aren't you saying? The ship won't survive the process. And anyone inside, coordinating the energy flow. Nina left the implications hanging. Olivia nodded, understanding. She turned to Theron. Your people, can they handle the crystal matrix end of the equation? Yes, he replied, his form pulsing with determination. But Olivia, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She touched the crystal pendant one last time, then removed it, holding it out to him. Sometimes leadership means being willing to finish what you started. The evacuation of the Phoenix was conducted swiftly. As her crew retreated to the relative safety of the Orosian underground shelters, Olivia made her way to the ship's engine room. Through the viewports, she could see Orosians taking up positions around the plaza, their crystalline forms beginning to glow as they prepared to channel the stabilizing energies. "Ready?" she asked over the comm. "The crystal matrices are aligned," Theron responded. "Olivia, thank you." She smiled, though no one could see it. "Thank me when it works." Initiating power transfer in 3, 2, 1. The ship's crystal hybrid engines screamed to life, channeling more power than they were ever designed to handle. Olivia's hands flew over the controls, monitoring the energy flow, making minute adjustments as the stabilizing field began to form. Outside, the Orosians glowed brighter and brighter, their combined energies merging with the Phoenix's output. The chaotic resonance patterns in the crystal matrices began to shift, finding new harmony as human technology and Orosian biology worked together as they were always meant to. The ship's systems were failing, one by one. Warning lights flashed, then died. Hull integrity alarms blared, then fell silent. But the energy transfer continued, guided by Olivia's steady hands and the combined will of two species fighting to save a world they shared. In her final moments, as the Phoenix's engines reached critical overload, Olivia saw through the failing viewports that the sky was changing. The sickly gray was giving way to purple once more, and the crystal forests in the distance had begun to shine with their old brilliance. Then, everything went white. Days later, when the dust had settled and the energy storms had calmed, the survivors emerged from the underground shelters to find their world transformed. The crystal matrices had stabilized, finding a new balance that incorporated both Orosian and human influences. The Phoenix was gone, but its sacrifice had sealed the breach between two species forever. Where the ship had stood, a new crystal formation had grown, one that glowed with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with the restored heartbeat of Oros itself. Its facets reflected both purple twilight and human determination, a monument to what could be achieved when pride gave way to understanding. Theron stood before this crystal, Nina and the other human survivors beside him, as he made the formal announcement: Oros would once again be home to both species, not as separate societies, but as one people united by their differences rather than divided by them. In the years that followed, ships would come from Haven, bringing more humans to help rebuild. The crystal forests would grow again, their patterns more complex and beautiful than before, shaped by the combined influence of two species working in harmony. Children would play in parks where crystal light danced with human technology, and no one would think it strange. And in the heart of the new city they would build together, the crystal that had grown from the Phoenix's remains continued to pulse with a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, or perhaps like laughter, a reminder that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. The dream that had begun on Oros so many years ago had not died. It had only needed time to grow into something stronger, something better, a future where the barriers between species fell away, leaving only the infinite possibilities of tomorrow's dawn.